My name is Sean Kransberg. I'm the engineering manager for Google Web Designer. We just recently launched a pretty big release with a lot of new features, and today we have myself and some of the engineers on the team that are going to go and demo some of these new features. I'm going to start off with the Spritesheet component. We have three engineers, both Lucas, Nicola, and Kishore, and they're going to go through animation, a navigation component that we built, plus some text enhancements, as well as a pretty big feature around dynamic. So we'll kind of take turns going through these, and then after, just take about 30 minutes to go through the demos, and then I know there's some questions in the question and answer pod already, and we'll go ahead and start going through those based on votes once we finish with the demos. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start the demos. Okay, so again, the first feature I'm going to show today is the Spritesheet component. So I've got this file I set up a little bit just by putting in the assets first. So I'm going to drag a couple of assets to the stage, pretty simple stuff. So I'm going to have a background just to give it, a little bit of color. And I'm going to align that a little bit better. And then I'm going to have this ground group that I made, just so I can simulate the ground rushing by. We'll start that right here. And I'm going to do just a really quick basic animation. So I'll go to 50, add a keyframe, and then at that keyframe we're going to have it move back. Align the container. There we go. All right, and then I want that to loop an infinite number of times. So let's preview that really quickly to see how that went. Okay, so just got the ground rushing by. Really simple. And then I'm going to add a couple of components real quick. So I'm going to bring in the new Spritesheet component. Now I'll position that just a little bit above the ground. You'll see why in a minute. And then I'm just going to get a tap area and bring that in too. Make that a really nice hit area. Okay, move that out of the way for the time being. All right, so now all I got to do is configure the component in the Properties Inspector. There's a couple different places I got to make changes. So, Spritesheets have individual animation frames, and I happen to know, because I already went into Photoshop and measured them, what the height and width of each of these frames are. So I'm going to go ahead and set that to what I know each frame to be. So it'll be 152 width and 139 height. The position and size. I'm going to come down here. I need to give it a source. And it's called foxy.png. I also need to set the width and height to the same 152 and 139 down here. I'm going to align it to the bottom, and I'm not going to do any scaling. And there's a couple of advanced settings I want to switch on as well. So I know this animation I'm going to invoke is about 12 frames long. I want it to go for 50 milliseconds. And it's going to loop an infinite number of times, and it's going to autoplay. So again, let's just preview that really quickly and see what we have. All right, so we've got this fox running, basically. It's just invoking that foxy.png to achieve that animation. All right, so we want a little bit of an interactivity. So now I'm going to add some events, just 2 events, really. All right, the first event I'll add will be to the tap area. So I'm going to do on touch click, define a new animation with the Spritesheet. And the Y offset for the second animation is going to be 278. So I know it's starting on the second row. And again, I'm just making the same width and height. This animation I'm going to invoke is 18 frames long. We're going to do 50 milliseconds. And it's only going to play one time. But we do want it to autoplay. So let's see what that got us. So I preview that. Fox is running. I click one time. Oh, I forgot something here. Let's see. Tap area. Yeah, touch click. 0, 0, 1. Yeah, I skipped something there. Oh. I was putting it out of the way so that I wouldn't have to deal with it, but let's put the tap area over the Spritesheet component so that it actually works. Preview. All right, so it jumps once and then it dies. So unless you're making a video game, that may not be the effect you want. So we're going to need one more event. All right, so one more event. And this one is targeting the Spritesheet. It's for when the animation ends. We're going to define a new animation on the Spritesheet. So there's no offset needed this time because we're going to start back at the beginning of the Spritesheet. So again, it's 153, 139, and this is 12 frame, just like the original running animation, which is what we're actually invoking here. It's going to loop forever, and it's going to autoplay. So let's do this final preview. This box is running. We click, jumps, keeps running. It's just a really quick interactive animation. We saw a lot of different customers trying to use Spritesheets, and there wasn't really a great way to do it in GWD. So we feel like this is really going to help people with their workflow in Spritesheets. And so that's the first demo. And then with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nicola, who's going to talk about the Street View component. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Nicola, and today I'm going to talk about the Street View component as well as other features that we'll be introducing for this release of GWD. I just put together here normal mustard, so 9070 by 250 pixels, and what I was trying to do here, I create different pages, as you can see, and each of them has the new Street View component. The component, you can see the list of the new components available on the component panel. In this release, we'll be introducing the Street View component as well as the spreadsheet one. If I quickly demo this creative, you can see we have the invitation stage with the first frame, and then by clicking one of the three buttons, we can move to different Street View components. We can move to the other page where we have different view of the same location, and moving on. This is the third one. Now, if I go back to GWD, you can see that we have a full set of features that are available in the component panel. So if we select the component on the stage and we go on properties, scrolling down, we have the show advanced setting, as well as the custom components properties that allows us to define a point in space by its latitude and longitude. If you click on Show Advanced Setting, we have three settings that allows us to move around the camera. The heading allows us to move the angle in which direction we are looking, so north, south, west, and east. The pitch is how tilted is our head looking down or up, and the zoom allows us to have a more close look of the item that we want to look at. If I go back on preview, let's say we move to Buckingham Palace, and instead of having the view looking at this direction, we want just slightly move the camera around. I go back to Google Web Designer, Buckingham Palace page. I do select the component, move to Show Advanced Setting, and I start playing around with the angle, moving 360 space. So let's say I tilt off 90 degrees. I preview, and now as you can see, I'm no longer looking at the street as I was looking before, but I'm looking a different direction. I really invite you to explore the component itself, especially in combination with the map components. We do believe it's really useful for store locator as well as an experience when it comes to show interest point around the world. Another feature that we've been working a lot for this release is the enhancement of the code view. As you remember, the previous version of the code view has just one theme, and it was like white oriented. This one has a more subtle color scheme. It does allow you to face the code editor for a longer period of time without actually get your eyes tired, as well as we work on enhancing the rendering of the font itself. Now is more smooth and less crisp. Also, we'll be introducing a new color scheme, so if you prefer, you can switch to the darker version of the color template by clicking the button here in the bottom right corner. Last things I want to talk about is the new set of templates we'll be introducing in this release. So if you click New from Template, you now have access to more than 180 different templates. We'll be introducing a lot of templates for brands, specifically VPage for YouTube, as well as master formats. But one of the most important templates that we'll be introducing for this release is the Lightbox engagement ads for Google Display Network. I'm going to quickly show you how it's being built. So this specific template allows you to create one creative that's going to work through all different platforms. So you have a page in which we define the creativity for the desktop environment, one for the tablet and one for the mobile. We do take care of resizing as well as orientation. So this is like a huge improve for the way you actually create engagement ads, and we take care of handling the full screen of the YouTube component as well as all the device changes. That's all from me, and I'd like to introduce Lucas that's going to talk about the new animation system.
Hi, I'm Lucas, and I'm going to talk about some of the improvements we've made to creating animations in Web Designer. So first I'm going to talk about animating position. When you set position as part of a layout, you typically do that using left and top styles, but when you animate position, it's almost always better to use translation instead. And this is for a couple of reasons. First of all, translation performs much better, especially on mobile devices. If you animate left and top, you might get 10, 15 FPS, whereas translation reliably runs in real time. A second reason is that at render time, left and top values are always rounded to the nearest integer, which can lead to jagged or stair-step-like animations. One common artifact you might have seen is that you have an element that gradually slides into a position, but what you see is a bunch of discrete changes in the actual pixel location of the element. And this doesn't happen when you use translation because sub-pixel positions are rendered faithfully. I would demonstrate this for you, but the frame rate on Hangouts isn't good enough to show something at that level. But you've probably seen this in practice yourself. So in light of this, we've made some of the tools in Web Designer. We've changed the default behavior of the tools to make it easier to create animations that use translation instead of left top. So here I have an image on screen, and I'm just moving it with the selection tool. And as before, it sets left and top styles. No difference there. But let's say that I add a keyframe and I move the element. And now what I've actually done is change translation. You can see the channels here. There's translation values. You could have done this previously by using the translation tool, but now it can be done without ever having to leave the selection tool. So here's the animation that I just made. And if I go to code view, and I'll make the text a little bigger so it's easier to see. Go to code view, then sure enough, we see that there's a style rule that just has left and top set, and a keyframes rule that uses translation. If you don't want to use this default behavior, you can override the selection tool's settings and the top tool shelf. So instead of having it use left and top for static position and translation for animated position, you can also have it always set left top or always set translation. And all these settings do have their use cases. To give an example, let's say that I have a simple animation where this car bounces. So there's the movement, and it goes up and down. OK, now I want to take this whole animation, and I want to translate it over to the right. Well, previously, what you would have had to do is go to the first keyframe and move the car, and then go to the second keyframe and move the car. And it's very annoying, especially when you have lots of animations, and you might change some of the constraints. So for example, here, when I move each keyframe individually, it might no longer be vertically aligned. That's kind of annoying. But now what you can do is you can instead switch the tool mode to left top and just move the initial keyframe. And now the whole animation is shifted over. And the reason this works is because translation is applied on top of left and top. So by setting just the static left top layout and preserving the translation, I can move the whole animation over just in one movement. So that's all I want to say about animating position. We've made similar improvements to how you can animate the size of elements. First of all, we now support scale. So here in the property inspector, there's a new row for setting scale in X, Y, and Z. I'm scaling both directions. If you want to scale it uniformly, there's a lock button on the left, and with that activated, when I change one channel, both channels change by the same amount. In analogy to setting positions, if I use the resize tool to change an element size, then for static size, I just set width and height as before. But if I'm making an animation and I change the size, that gets applied to scale instead. So here is the animation that I just created. And if I look at it in code view, then as before, I see that there is a, oops, I'm going to change the tool settings back to use translation, no problem. Let's again add that, and I resize it. And now in code view, we see that the keyframes use translate and scale, and the style rule uses left, top, width, and height. One final improvement we've made is we've simplified the process for animating rotations when the element goes through multiple revolutions. Previously, we had this limitation where from keyframe to keyframe, you can only go at most 180 degrees, but now that's been dropped, and you can set whatever rotations you like. So here I have the car. I'll have it go across the screen. I'll set its rotation on the second key to 720 degrees, and when I play the animation, that's probably hard to see because it's so fast. Let me slow it down to, say, 3 seconds. And when I play the animation, you can see that it goes through both full revolutions. So that's all I wanted to say, and I will now turn it over to Kishore, who will talk about our support for Dynamic.
Hello, I'm Kishore Subramanian from the GWD team, and today I'm excited to talk about a feature that we introduced in the latest version of GWD, which is the ability to author dynamic creatives in GWD. So dynamic creatives are ones where data is provided to the creative at runtime. So this is, let me start by showing you where this data is set. So let's go to, let's start with the studio. As some of you know, most of you know, profiles in Studio are the place where dynamic information is set. So this is basically done by uploading a spreadsheet or a Google spreadsheet CSV file containing dynamic data. So in this case, for instance, let me use a profile that I'll be using for this demo. Now here's a spreadsheet that contains some of these columns. So we have things like title. So these are for products, products that we want to show in the creative, and has information such as title, description, CTA, image, and so on. Right now, this is uploaded into a profile, and at runtime, some rows from this spreadsheet are selected based on various criteria and passed on to the creative, which can then use that information to render the appropriate ad. So previously, it was a developer-heavy workflow where somebody had to copy this HTML5 generated code into a creative and then manually set up the data binding and to make this happen. Now, we have improved this considerably in GWD, and I will show you how. So let me switch the demo now to GWD. All right, let me pick okay. All right. Now here's a GWD creative that I've authored. So let's say we start with a DoubleClick creative, where let me preview this so we know where we start from. Let me switch back to GWD here. 1 second. Okay. Now let's say we have a creative similar to this, where it's a 300 by 600 creative, where we want to provide information about different set of products that that are going to be provided through the feed, a dynamic feed. Now here's image that we want to provide, and here's some information about the product, right? So there's all this different information, and the CTA button call to action button with add to cart or whatever text comes from the dynamic feed. Now let's take this and see how we can make this dynamic. To do this, I'm going to show you what exactly this creative contains and then go on to the dynamic part. Okay, so we have a swipe gallery, which is one of the components that we support, which is a swipeable gallery here. I've already dragged and dropped it onto the stage, and also has a navigation component to it. Now, within the swipe gallery, I have a group called the gallery panel. So let me show you what the group contains. This currently contains a placeholder image and some placeholder text laid out in this particular fashion, right? Now, and that's what we saw in preview with placeholder text shown there. Now let's go ahead and make this dynamic. Okay, so to do that, I'm now going to pull up the dynamic panel, which shows up on your on the right-hand side of your screen. I'm going to click plus here. Now, as soon as I do that, it's prompting me to select an account, advertiser, and a profile ID. So basically, this is the source of dynamic information or dynamic feed that we need to provide. So let me pull up an account. And here's the profile that I previously showed you in the Studio UI. I'm going to select that. And as soon as I do that, the UI navigates me to the bindings panel. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what binding is supposed to do. So as I mentioned previously, dynamic data is provided to the creative at runtime. And we need to now take that information and bind it to the different elements in our creative. So for instance, we have a placeholder image, and we need to change that to show the image of the product, right? So here are the different elements that are available to us in the creative, and based on what we select, we get different attributes of that particular element. So data binding is the process of binding information from the dynamic feed, in this case, to an element's attribute. So here we have the image of the model, and we pick the source property of that. So since image has a source, and I'm going to bind that to information from the dynamic feed. Now, as you would see here, these fields are exactly the same columns that you see in the spreadsheet that we saw initially. So I'm going to pick the URL of the image as the key path, or as the information to bind to the model image here. So let me also add a couple of more bindings here. So the title and its text content of the title, I want to bind that to the title field, which is available right here. And as you can see, the data binding is very intuitive and very straightforward. No need to change code or have a developer do this. It's very straightforward compared to the previous workflow. So text content again bound to the description field in this case. And I'll not go through the whole thing, but let's do one more binding and then switch to and see what the preview looks like. So here's the text content again, and the CTA text information is now bound to the CTA field. Now let's click OK and preview this. So as you can see here, now I'm reading the model image is now read from the feed, and some of these the information is also coming from the dynamic information that was set. Now let's go back, but you can see that there's only one product here. So we still need to bind it to the collection of products so that we can have that as a nice swipe gallery with a list of products. So to do that, I'm going to go back to my swipe gallery, and I want to now repeat. So as I previously mentioned, the swipe gallery is configured to use a group called gallery frame. So gallery frame is, think of it as a template for each frame of the gallery. So I'm going to now repeat that frame. I want to repeat that for each item in my list of products, and the list of products in this case is the spreadsheet. So I'm going to bind to that. And you would complete the rest of the data binding in the similar fashion. So I'm going to now just switch to a creative that I'd already built with the exact same creative, but in the interest of time, where I'd already pulled in all the different information. So here's the list of products that you could, in this case, I have the same products being repeated. But as you can see here, you can swipe through the different images and the different products, and in the information for the different products are shown in the frames. So once you do that, coming back to GWD, you would publish your creative in the exact same way. You could publish to Studio directly, or you could publish it locally and then upload it to Studio, and the links to the profile, everything would be automatically provided, and then you could preview it from Studio as well. With that, I'll pass it on to Sean for any Q&A. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Kishore. So that was some of the demos. Let me stop sharing for a second so we can get back on camera. And I'll bring the guys on one by one as we have questions. So let's see. There's a bunch of questions being upvoted right now on the Q&A. Let me take a look at some of those and see if we have. So the top voted one is, can GWD support mask functions? So it will. And we have a plan for how we're going to do masking, basically, in a way that you would expect, as far as the timeline having masks and maskees. But we haven't started working on that yet. We're actually in the middle of Lucas, the guy who's going to work on that, is in the middle of a big responsive feature. That's one of the next big things that we're doing, where you'll be able to deal with media rules in a visual way and author them visually on stage. But probably somewhere in the late spring, we'll start working on that, and then hopefully in the summer sometime, or a little bit later, maybe in the fall. I'm looking at Lucas as I say this. It's a very complex feature, but we do want to make sure we bring that functionality to users. It's a big priority for us. Let's see, next one. Perhaps to resolve the file size issue, there could be an easy way to strip the CSS.js into separate files. I manually did that for the ads we created earlier. Okay, so, hey, Nicola, do you want to speak to that? So we're all in the same room, by the way. We're just off camera. So.
Yeah, sure. So the ads files issue has been a problem for the industry for a while, and to be honest, the shift from Flash creatives to HTML5 creatives has been driving a lot of conversation about that. We see publishers that are working close with us, and IMB as well, changing the spec as well. So what we are looking at is actually working with file size from publisher specs. We definitely greater than it is at the moment. So moving from 75K to more than 150 for standard creatives and 450 for polite loaded creative. Said so is actually part of our personal OKRs to drive like compression on the components as well on the overall runtime. Just as a reference point compared to all the other products available today as HTML5 authoring tools, GWD is the one with the lowest overhead of code.
I mean, the typical creative, including the runtime, is like 50 to 60 kilobytes, and that's even with components because they do a lot of sharing. So I mean, they're quite small. That we always are working to make them smaller. So I just saw a question that popped. I don't think it. So will this session be recorded in video? I'm not sure if it's being recorded on video. I'm actually positive about that. We can get back, and maybe someone can put it in the comment section, but I'm not sure honestly. So SVGs were not allowed to be used as dynamic images before. Are they now, or will they be in the future? So any comment on that, Kishore? SVGs? I don't think we have it on our radar in terms of using SVGs as a dynamic asset. But they're going to look into something, and I'll come back to that question. Would be great to have an infinite gallery option within your swipe gallery component. Yeah, and that's something that you guys have looked at. Again, Nicola, you wanted to, because I think you had that.
Yeah,
anyway.
So that's definitely on our pipeline. We're looking to add this feature for the spring release. We also have some workaround at the moment available by using custom events. It's possible actually to loop the creative itself. What I would suggest is to reach out to our support team, and I would be more than happy to share with you the process to introduce these custom events. But definitely that's coming up, and it's going to coming up soon. So yeah, looking forward for that.
Okay. This is popping up faster than I can. So have there been more requests for Street View than masking? So that's the kind of question that I would ask if I was a customer right now, to tell you the truth. Street View was an internal effort. It was pretty straightforward to implement, and we have had requests for it for sure. Definitely there's been more requests for masking. But masking has been a much harder thing to do correctly. We don't want to put something out there that's going to blow file size or not be performant. So again, we do have a plan, and I think masking is our most requested feature, and we will get to it this year. I'm really excited about it, and I know it'll make using the tool a lot better. So it's definitely a priority. Again, all right. So question about. Okay, I'm just going through all these real quick. All right, so why the integrated template expanding video and map that gives the dimensions mobile device running on WP 8.1? I mean, so I don't know, Nick, you could probably answer this, but it's more about the fragmented landscape on mobile, and so I mean we're testing on a lot of all the major systems that cover 98% of the coverage really. So I mean, anything you want to add to that, or?
We're always looking for feedback like this one, but we need to prioritize based on the amount of impression we serve for each platform. At the moment, we don't see a high volume for that specific platform, but we definitely take in consideration the feedback.
Okay. And then Kishore, there's a question for you. Is it possible to export a feed from Sheets or Studio to JSON format? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we don't support that today. You can't take a JSON feed and upload it and use that as a sample. However, you could change the code. If you go to the code view in GWD for the creative, you can make changes to the generated code, the H5 generated code that gets copied over, and then preview it. So that would be a reasonable workaround for now, and this is something we could consider for future.
Okay. Let's see. How can you add a generic click tag for use with other platforms besides DCM? So I guess as long as you're publishing for DoubleClick or AdWords, then we can take care of translating the click tag, pretty much, particularly to the environment, I would think. Anything you guys want to add to that? Third-party ad servers or anything you want to mention?
Yeah, there's also a possibility to hook to the tab area custom events, so we do suggest to look into that by just clicking on the events panel, custom events, adding a new one, selecting the tab area, and when it comes to the target, you can define whatever function you want. So you can copy and paste the code that the third-party ad server is providing.
Okay. And so current browser support, more specifically, does software support IE 10 and older, so Android 4.4.1 and above. Again, it's more than 95% of current Android distributions. We do support IE 10, but that does account for like 0.6% of served impressions. All right. Can you bring a group from one file into another file? So no. It's not currently supported, but something we could consider in the future, though. Let's see. Any support for easing? So in the timeline, there is some basic support for easing. If you right-click on transition bar on I can actually show that really quickly. Let me just share my screen again. Okay, so in the timeline, make a keyframe. All right, wait, let me right click here. Yeah, so the invoking the oh wait, it's only in quick mode. All right, let's have Lucas show you real quick. Go and do it.
Yeah. So.
Just move the element.
Oh, because something moved.
Oh, there's the menu option.
Yeah, I thought I was crazy for a second.
Yeah, no, you're not crazy. I don't know why that doesn't appear.
Please start a new file real quick. Maybe we've gotten some weird state.
Sure. Actually, I'll switch to this one.
But you were just doing it right there, so it should still be there.
Yeah, so here we go. So there's a right-click menu, context menu on the span, not on the keyframe. And here it has the UI. You can select ease out, ease in, or custom. And the custom, you just set the Bezier spline control points.
And I mean, it's reasonably, like, it gives you some control. I think we can do better over time with things like motion guides. Another thing that is more of a medium-term plan that we're thinking about doing. And so let's go back to some more questions. If I've got to the bottom on this list here. Are you going to add guides to the rules GWD? Well, I mean, we could. It's something we could take under advisement. And let me go back over here real quick, see if there's any other questions I'm missing. All right, so will it be possible to use your own web fonts on ads and store them outside of the ad, like in the resource gallery, in order to reduce the ad size? I mean, there's definitely a lot of work happening around web fonts with DoubleClick and GWD. I think today that's not directly supported, but it is something that both people in DoubleClick side and on the GWD side are looking into. And will I hit the gong? Well, we're not quite done yet. That's like the top voted one. I'm not going to tell you where this gong is from, but if people knew it, I think they think it was pretty funny. I will say that a lot of us used to work on the Flash team, and the Flash team had a gong. That's all I'm going to say. Is it possible to keep scrolling in one direction to loop through the gallery? Did we already answer that one? Yeah. Okay. I think we've have to answer that one. Support for masking, we answered that. What about using a product feed with thousands of products instead of a custom one, as you did in the example, with just 4 products? Will it be possible?
Yeah, it'll be. So the feed can contain any number of products, right, when you upload it to Studio. However, when we use GWD to bind to that profile and select the profile, we get a selection of 4 or 5 products. I mean, it's not meant to test with thousands of products right within GWD. The idea is to basically test your creative and make sure that your layout is good and all that. And then you bring it back to Studio, and that is where you would do the testing with different criteria and make sure that the right set of products are being selected.
Is it possible to make the timeline like Edge Animate? Well, I mean, we wouldn't make it just like Edge Animate. And to be honest, I don't even look at Edge Animate just because I think it's probably a smart idea. But look, there's a lot of concepts, going back years that are really industry standards, and how animation works. So we definitely want to conform to industry standards, and I can say that we're going to do a big improvement for our timeline in general in 2016. We'll be adding a lot of additional functionality, which I'll take some more questions, but it kind of leads into I wanted to kind of give people a sneak peek of what we're going to do in 2016, like holistically. And I mean, the things that I know are happening right now, for example. So one of the big ones is an effort to completely redo the entire user interface of the tool. And that's both architectural and from a skinning perspective. So that's been ongoing for a while. It's kind of in the weeds a little bit, but the entire UI will be in Polymer. We're kind of excited about that. It's going to be a material design look, a dark material design look that Google's been pushing. And it looks fantastic, what I've seen so far, and it's going to be bringing things in like tab panels, just better ways to utilize your real estate. We keep adding functionality, and we have this panel rack, with very little space to do anything. So you'll see in the spring a release coming out that includes that. I already mentioned more work around responsive and support for media rules as an authoring construct. That, again, will be something that comes out in the spring. And I'm telling you things right now that we're actually in the middle of, not just sort of pie in the sky. And then we have a lot more improvements coming around text authoring and text handling and font management. Again, that's in the spring. And the final thing I'll mention is really several different things. I won't go too deep, but we want to revamp what you may consider to be the developer workflow which will benefit both developers and designers. So having a more robust code editor with a lot more options, a lot more powerful search as an example, a lot more components. So we think it'll be great to be able to bring in a lot of the custom elements that the Polymer team is doing for like UI widgets, so for radial buttons, drop-down boxes, etc. So we'd love to have those native inside of GWD, be able to also see all components on stage, so that when you're laying out a bunch of UI controls, you don't just see a bunch of gray boxes. A lot of our current ad-specific components kind of are boxes, whether it's the map component or some of these things. So it's not that big of a burden to do some basic layout. But when you get into more of the specific UI widgets, I think it's going to be better to actually see those on stage, and of course make sure that you can preview all different types of components in the preview. And there's some work we're doing there. So that's like in the kind of short to medium term, like a spring release. And then I mentioned things like masking, timeline improvements, continue to improve the UI. And that'll be going on throughout the year. There'll also be more enhancements to Dynamic eventually later on in the year. There'll be more animation improvements. So there's quite a few things that are happening in 2016. So they're asking, can we post the answers to the questions after? I think we probably should be able to do that. We're writing some of these down too, so we'll try to do that, yes. Let's see, so another question on top here. So that's the quick sneak peek of what we're doing at a high level, and hope some of that stuff sounds exciting. So when we are making a big campaign in Flash, we use a copy and paste all frames and animation that would be possible in GWD, copy and paste all timeline with events, the same with the duplicate page. So yeah, we should do that. The timeline enhancements I'm talking about are things along those lines, copying, pasting spans, just having a finer level of control of the content that you're working with in the advanced timeline. So yes, we care about that, and we're going to make a lot of improvements on that. Jump into our forum if you have specific ECRs around the timeline. We'd love to hear them. We have a lot already, but we'd love to hear more feedback from you guys. So it could be nice if you have the mobile preview function for fluid banners. Okay, that's a good suggestion. Will it be any integration to libraries like TweenMax? So there's a bunch of different really cool animation libraries that we've thought about how we could integrate with them. I mean, we're animating on the timeline with CSS. So some of these JS libraries, certainly you can bring in any library in GWD and call it. But how I would directly embed that to work with the timeline has been a little bit elusive on how you would do a deep integration. What's the other one that we talked to those guys? Yeah, there's 3 or 4 different ones. And so we don't want to sort of pick one over the other. I'd rather have a way that you can easily integrate even better different types of libraries so that you can utilize them how you want. And so you can imagine, though it's not slated right now, an actual code library that exists in the tool along with some of these developer improvements that we want to do. But it's not in the short term, to be honest, but it's something that we realize could be really great. It's possible to save a GWD and an AdWords at the same time. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I get what they're saying there. I mean, so you can totally create AdWords content in GWD, and then you can publish it out and upload it into AdWords. I'm not sure if I really captured the essence of that question or not, but if not, put in another one and I will try to get to it. We're using Wolf fonts. Oh, that disappeared. Oh, they're moving around so much. We are using Wolf fonts to support custom fonts. It looks like a good solution. Can you see any limit or compatibility issues? Not that I can, anything that comes to mind. I can't think of anything on top of the head that would be a compatibility issue per se. Do you need to insert click tag in GWD, or can you do it in DoubleClick? That's actually a great question.
Yeah, so you don't need to express the exit URL in GWD necessarily, but you need to at least drag and drop a tab area, and then you can always override the exit in Studio. So that's possible as long as you at least drag and drop the tab area. Same is true for DCM.
So the next question, would you be able to upgrade the code view a little bit, like search and place? Yes, and that's what we're doing right now. We have one engineer dedicated to that, and that's only one piece of the various things we want to do around the developer workflow. But it's tough because there's really great code editors out there, a lot of them, and every developer has their own specific tastes. So it's not like we want to go toe-to-toe with all these really great editors, but we want to make sure that the editor in GWD, if you want to use it, it has all the modern functionality that you would expect, and we're going to make it as good as we can, and we're going to invest a lot of time and effort into it over multiple months. So we care about it, and we're going to do a lot more. You are making a great job. I love G. Okay, thank you. They love GWD. At least those two people do. How do you suggest we keep file sizes down for vendors still at 40K? Well, a couple of you guys might have some tips there. I mean, the smallest possible thing you could do in GWD would be an HTML file with no pages and just an enabler.
Yeah, the smallest possible size is around 40 KB.
With no content, though, right?
With no content, no components. Yeah, it tops around 40 KB at this point, right? So, and as you add more and more components to it, that you get the benefit of that because the bulk of it is in the runtime already.
But are you saying if you go file new, just HTML file with no pages?
No, then you could just.
You've got really no benefits.
Then there's nothing. Then it's up to you.
You got to put the enabler in, of course.
Yes, and that doesn't get counted in this 40 KB.
Right. So then, I mean, if you can work in a raw HTML file, there's a lot of benefits to using the DoubleClick specific files. It requires a little bit more finesse on your part to work with those raw files, but it's possible to create a totally blank file.
You could.
And still get the benefits of some of the really cool authoring features that we have. All right, so would you like an answer that Rod had asked the file set issue? I'm not sure on that one. Would you like an answer that? Yeah, I'm not sure on that one. I'll come back to it. Maybe we can clarify a little bit.
I think it was grouped with the one before.
Was it? Okay. Would you be able to copy and paste frames, as you mentioned, that will be improved in timeline function in 2016? Yeah, so we're definitely doing more in 2016. And what I don't know, I don't have a schedule in front of me about all the things we're doing. I know we're going to start working on it, which is like in the very late spring. And when I deploy that, I'd be pretty crazy to commit to that right now. But like it's something that we care a lot about, and there'll probably be multiple engineers on it. Question is there any change with the ad rules for the size issue, or is there anything Google is thinking about? Well, I don't know how deep I can go with that, but I know that there's a lot of things happening within Google, and Google working with external people to try to work with what are the standards across the industry. And I'm going to have to leave it at that. I don't want to go too deep. I'm not sure what's public and not, but obviously as Google, we're always engaging in those areas, and I think we'll see progress over time. I mean, not many folks are on modems anymore, so I don't know why the 40K limit exists in so many places, and it'd be great to see that expanded a little bit. Not sure if you touched on this already, but is there a file compression tool you might look to integrate in GWD? Well, I would love to have file compression native inside the tool, and I think that's something that we will look into, and I think there's probably some things at Google that we could try to see if we can utilize. And I don't want to say specific products, but I mean, there's a lot of great compression tools out there, and again, a lot of times people have a very specific taste on which one they use, and so you'll always be able to pre-compress your things, but I would like to have some compression right in the tool, and it's not something that, to be honest, is slated in the near term, but it's something on our medium-term roadmap to take a look at. Is it possible we could see the compiled size within design view? Yes. Okay, so that's a feature that we want to try to get this year, which we call it the info panel, or ways that you can get more live feedback on the file size and other things, errors, etc. Say we have that butter bar, that yellow bar that goes across the top. So I think over time we're going to expand the information that you get at offer time so that you have a lot more tools to sort of make good choices. Like if you add something crazy on the stage and you see your file size blow up right away, it'd be really great to know that so that you maybe rethink that decision and try a different asset. So it's a great thing to do, and we're going to do it. I can't promise like how quick.
Currently it's showing in the publish.
Yeah, you can see it in the publish dialog, but they want to see it like real time at offer time. So what are the advantages using GWD compared to Edge Animate? So I don't want to get too much in the weeds of that because there's a lot of great tools out there. I think that our file sizes are pretty small, and I think our animations are pretty quick because we use hardware accelerated CSS. I'm sure that somebody else could tell me a lot of great benefits What's that?
You can start from GWD and
Right.
the code is very readable that we generate.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as I was going to be nice and say, but there's probably a lot of great reasons to use Edge too. I don't know. I mean, like I think that we take the approach. I can only speak for us. I can't speak for other products, but we really want to be as open web as possible, as standards compliant as possible. We don't want to create a really huge proprietary stack that you have to use our stuff. Like we don't want that. Like we give you the option to do things like Google Drive. We don't force you to do it because we give you native file I/O as an example. And right down the line, we've tried to be as neutral as we can be so that people don't feel like they're being force-fed something Google. I mean, we want you to make great Google ads, and that's really the point. The point is not as much that we have the coolest tool ever, though we want to make the coolest tool ever. The point is that we can help you make great ads and other content. So when this update will be available. So I want to say spring, and I really can't give a date that's sooner than that. I think it'll be shortly after Game of Thrones Season 6 comes out.
Just clarify that the feature we showed today are really live.
Yeah, everything we showed today is already live. That stuff that we launched back in November, and so you can if you just relaunch GWD, you should see all those features. And but the next big one will be right after Game of Thrones Season 6 comes out. So support for masking. The big problem is raised that there is so much white issues going on with ads. I think we hit that one already, didn't we? You mentioned, yeah. I think now I'm looking at a bunch of questions that I believe we've answered all of them.
No, they're similar.
They're similar. 0.6 of popularity. Will it support IE9? I don't think we do. I don't think that we do support IE9. I mean, we're HTML5 focused, so we're targeting the modern web, and that may not be perfect because there's still some older browsers hanging on. But I mean, as time moves on, like you got to think that people are going to want to use a modern browser. And with some of the numbers I'm seeing on like IE9, like it's really, really low. And what I'd hate to do is target the lowest common denominator with a brand new advanced tool, which would then make it to where you can't have all these amazing features that HTML5 provides. So it's a trade-off, and we do support 10, and we try to not be too aggressive with it, but we have to at least be able to create modern content, or what's the point? If I'm hand coding ads, are there reasons to switch to GWD? Does the GWD team approve hand coding? Absolutely, we approve hand coding. I mean, most of us are developers. We hand code all day long. We've definitely set it up to where you have a design view and a code view, and you can start in code view and you can do a whole lot. I mean, I remember even in my Flash days, like when people were really 90% AS3, they would still use the authoring tools for rapid prototyping. So there's some things like our tool has 3D capabilities, for example, that it's just a little bit easier to just mock something up visually when you want to get very precise 3D calculations, and then maybe go into the code view and add to that. So it's not about only use design view or only use code view. It's really about making sure both of those are available. But what I would say is the reason we're investing now in the code view, in other things around components, is we want to make sure that really, if you're someone who just wants to hand code, that we give you a great option. And I think right now, I think it's really cool that you can make a change in code view, go over design view, and you see it live, and vice versa. That's not a perfect process, and I think there's improvement that we can do there. And certainly on the code editor, there's a lot of improvement. So today I would say, like, there's probably better code editors out there, but I don't think there's many things out there that'll let you do some quick visual mock-ups, come over to code view, make some changes, add some code in, come in and see that live, and plus have all these components that work great with the DoubleClick stack. All that combined, I think it could still be a useful thing even for a developer, and we're going to try to win you guys over more and more over time. The name Google Web Designer doesn't have the same SEO, especially if you're looking for non-Google resources about GWD. Any thoughts about changing the name? So the original name that I wanted was Google Ninja, and it was called that internally for a while. We thought that just because it sounded cool, to be honest. I think the name has a lot of branding around it now, and we're sort of used to it. We have a pretty cool logo that we like a lot, and I think the name's here to stay. But we say web designer. I mean, we really do aspire to do more than just ads. But that's definitely our focus. But we want to make sure we never block off a path to doing you know, a website or a mini site or something like that. There's no reason why you couldn't do that. We've just really attacked the ads use case first because that's, you know, the one we really want to make sure we have nailed down. But everything we do, like when we do masking, for example, masking won't be a feature that you can only use for an ad. You know, it'll be something you can use for any web content. But definitely, like when you go and look at all the Flash ads over the years, like almost all of them had masking, right? So a lot of features that are good for one use case are good for other use cases, if that makes any sense. In DoubleClick Studio, an alert message appears for the primary file weight greater than 75K. My understanding is we should go by the compressed size. Is that not correct? Why is
Studio's aware. They know of the problem. They haven't got to it.
All right, thank you. Studio is aware of that problem, and they haven't got to a fix yet, it sounds like. So this next question is awesome. Say hi to Tony Moat from Adelve in Spain. You guys are great. I've been using GPD from the very beginning. So Tony Moat is our product manager. He's my best friend. He can't be here right now, and hopefully he will be in the future. But anyway, thank you for that comment. So is there any update on that these features will be compatible with AdWords or only DoubleClick? So
Spritesheet Component in whitelisted and in production right now.
Great for AdWords.
Yeah.
So it definitely works in DoubleClick and
Not Street View.
no, I mean the Spritesheet.
Yeah.
And the Spritesheet is going to be whitelisted on
It's
AdWords.
already whitelisted.
So Spritesheet works on both Street View, which ones?
Street View is not.
It's not on AdWords.
No.
Okay. Let's see. Sorry for the late, guys. I asked a question about file size. Let's see. And if you can't bring groups from one file into another, can there be a way to retroactively change the type to standard HTML? So that would be. I can see if people would want that. You know, you start off with say DoubleClick, and then you want to switch to something else, having to redo the whole creative.
Oh, from DoubleClick to AdWords, for instance?
To generic.
The generic.
Okay.
We don't have the UI for it, but we do have instruction on how to do it in code.
Right. Yeah. There's a way to do it in code view that we have instructions. I guess is it on our help center on the
So
forum?
DoubleClick to AdWords at least is easy.
Yeah.
To generate.
The same enabler basically. Right. So yeah, there's instructions on how to do it on our forums. You can ping us on there if you can't find us. Let us know. GWD should upload the backup image to DoubleClick. That's a good point. So not the first time we've heard that. That's a good point. And if you can't bring groups from, okay, I think we already did that one, right? Yeah. So is there any? Could I join? Could I join web design? Well, submit your resume. We'd be happy to look at it. Is it possible to make? So I'm not seeing any new questions unless I'm missing something. Default option to create polite load. I think we do have the ability to do polite loading in the published dialog, right?
Yes.
Sorry, I think isn't it
And
checked?
it's on by default.
It's checked by default, yeah. So polite loading is in the published settings. Check it by default. It's checked by default, and you can always uncheck it as well. Let's see.
Here's the last question we can miss.
Which
The
one?
start animation when it's on the viewport.
I'm not seeing it. Sorry. Oh, is there a way to make my ad start its animation when it's on the viewport? I don't think the components have that ability right now.
So the very first time when the ad comes into the viewport, that's when the intro animation starts.
But then if it comes out of the viewport,
And goes out of the viewport and come back in.
does it stop each time?
It stops, but then when it comes back, no, it doesn't stop actually today. So this is a good enhancement.
It should, I think, is their point.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So there's work we could do there, and we've thought through that. But thank you for that comment because I agree with you. It should probably do that at some point.
I agree.
That'd be a great optimization. How can you retroactively change the file? Okay, so got that. When is your next hangout for DWG? Oh, for GWD, I guess they mean. I don't know. So I mean, we're going to do one in Asia, I think, in the next day or so. Every time we launch, the team will actually get involved with this. I know there's folks in services that do other hangouts. I don't have the schedule of when those occur, but certainly whenever we launch a big release, we're going to try to do this just so we have a chance to talk to you guys. Let's see.
Can images be linked in? That's one of the things.
Can images be linked in? In what way? Like
From external web or?
Yeah, so if we are considering of using an external link and just import that instead of adding a relative path, that's possible on the code view for sure. The only thing is not possible to see and preview the image because of sandbox issues, but it's definitely something that can be done.
Once we have a web server, though, then you can do. Oh, so let me mention that because
sometimes URL is blocked by AdWords. Right?
Yeah, of course, we need to, you need to be aware that all the content that's being served from third-party servers may be or maybe not whitelisted from our server. So when the ads goes live, actually, you need to be careful where your resources are, as well as the number of impressions that we have with standard ads is pretty high. So necessarily, you also need to have a server that's able to handle the load.
That's one thing we're doing though is we're looking at putting in like a Mongoose web server in the tool so that when you preview a lot of things that don't really show up so great in preview without that will be better. This will help in some cases. Doesn't really protect you if it's not whitelisted by AdWords, but it'll still be a better experience. Do you know why publishers are ignoring the new file size standards and still ask for approximately? Well, I can't get inside their heads, but I'm assuming that they want things to load as fast as possible because things that load fast normally get more clicks. But I think this is going to evolve, you know, and it's just going to take time. I think the trade-off for someone like that is like, well, what's the result? If the more expressive an ad is, often, you know, the more results that ad will get. If it has to be a little bit bigger to get these better click-throughs, I think it's really about talking to the publishers and showing them that why these little bit larger file sizes are going to get you better results and make you more money. How about copy and paste between two different docs? Yes, we're going to do that, and I'm not going to do that in the near term, but it is something we'll get done. There's so many things on our plate, but like that is something that we know we need to do. It's so basic. It's a little embarrassing that we can't do it, to be honest, but we're gonna work on it. Are you planning to do some video tutorials about Dynamic? So I think we did already, right? You guys already recorded all your video tutorials. Are they published already, or are they still being edited? I'm not sure about that. So for all the new features, like we did really in-depth videos. You did one too for animation, right, Lucas? Yeah. So I'm not sure if they're up there right now, but if they are, okay, so they are. So go check it out. There's one for animation. There's one for the components. I think there's one for dynamic, and definitely watch the dynamic one. There's a lot of different things to learn there, and I think it's really helpful. So in carousel component could be add an arrow control to navigate both directions, left and right, instead of only swiping.
We can use that using events and tap area.
Right, so tap area and events is the way to achieve that, to go either way. Copy component loses its events, so if you have multiple buttons, you have to. I keep moving while so I get the gist. So it'd be pretty cool if we could save the events when we copy. Yeah, I don't know why. I mean that's not an unreasonable expectation. So we'll look at that. In carousel component could be okay. So is there any update on this? I don't know what that is. All right, close out some of these ones I've already answered. Is it possible to save? Yeah, so there's nothing new on here. I think I've hit all these. I already answered the Edge timeline thing. Is it possible to save GBD and AdWords at the same time? I think we kind of covered that. So any other last questions? I hope you guys enjoyed the new features. There's a lot more to come. We work really hard, and these guys are working really, really fast. So I'm hoping sometime this year we'll remove the beta moniker. There's a couple things, like I'm not going to remove the beta moniker if I don't even have masking. You can't even mask things. Oh, beta's over. People are going to, I don't think they're going to appreciate that. So we have to have a couple things. Oh, can we add custom classes to some elements in code view? I think, yeah, there's no reason why they couldn't, right? Yes, you can. Anyway, so lots of exciting stuff this year. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I guess we ran a little bit over, but thanks so much for taking the time to watch the demos, ask questions, and we'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much. Bye.